I have three great panelists to join me here on the stage. We're going to try and speak into these microphones because my voice is certainly going, and I think Kellie Covington's voice is going as well. But if we're going to have first John Shehata, John, who in his spare time keeps horses' heads out of beds in various parts of the world. John, come and join me on the stage. John is an international lawyer looking after some pretty well-known, some in fact very, very well-known America's Cup and World Champion sailors. So John is going to share with us his views and experience and his knowledge, more importantly, about some legislation that we're going to be aware of. Where have we got? Is Erwan with us? Erwan Faoucher. Faoucher is Erwan is from Group Beneteau. I don't know if anybody knows about Group Beneteau, but they're a small local boat builder in the northwest of France. Come and join us on the stage, Erwan. Erwan heads up the innovation, sustainability, and research side of Group Beneteau. So it's going to share with us his knowledge. And Kellie and I, who go back some way now, is going to talk about the positioning of this industry when it comes to the question of sustainability. And in fact, last but not least, as Kellie sits down, I think you're going to be able to set the scene for us, are you not, Kellie?
Well, maybe you want to share the first slide. So yeah, my name is Kellie Covington. I'm co-founder of the Sustainable Marine Alliance, which is an organization that's trying to really build collaboration across the industry on sustainability because, well, we need to go faster and we need more resources. So to set the scene, I'll give you this, one of my favorite graphs. And I think the reason behind it, so these are the planetary boundaries, and this is a big piece of work that's been done by the Stockholm Resilience Centre. And if you're not aware of it, you should be. But it shows that the scientists have calculated the different boundaries around our ecosystem on the planet. And you can see that there's 9 key factors, and we're already actually outside the safe space in 6 of them. So I really wanted to use this as a basis for our talk today because we're talking about life cycle assessment, and life cycle assessment really looks a lot further than just our climate change impacts. So climate change is one of those pizza slices that you can see on here. So they are also very connected, but I just wanted to make the point that a holistic approach is really important, and understanding all of our impacts and not just focusing on one. And I think for foiling, and if you go to the second slide, I did only do 2, so it's not many. For foiling, I think this is really important as well, because in one angle, well, firstly, we're all here right at the beginning of this, well, not the beginning of the adventure, but the first Congress. I know it's been an adventure for Luca for a long time. But we're right at the beginning. We've got an opportunity to understand our risks. And while foiling presents a real opportunity in terms of decarbonisation, there are also some really strong inherent risks associated with it as well. So building foils, it's been really interesting to see some of the presentations today talking about, the additional complexity that's associated with these technologies, the extra materials and the life cycle assessments that are starting to come out of race boats show that building the foils is a huge, huge part of the impact of a boat. We've also got, resource scarcity. We were talking about lithium batteries. We're moving to electrification. There are some real risks around that as well. I mean, the graph I just showed you also only talks about our environmental risks, but, particularly around battery technology, there's a huge amount of supply chain risks as well, and human rights issues. So I just really would like us as an industry to approach it with a very holistic point of view, right from the beginning, and do our best to understand it so that we can make the most of the opportunity to also manage it and do better than a lot of other industries have done so far.
But to that point, though, Kellie, I was thinking about the last Vendée Globe race, and I'm thinking about most sailing campaigns today. Everybody seems to be virtue signaling about how they are doing something for water, they're doing something for sustainability, they're doing Do you see that? You live close to Lorient, one of the great centres of competitive offshore sailing in the world. How many of the campaigners that are sitting there, and Erwan, I think you can address this question as well, because, of course, with Beneteau, you're significantly involved with the Figaro class, with a foiling class, which, looking at the teams, everybody seems to be claiming an association with they're looking at their sustainability credentials. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, very, very much. How honestly do I speak? No. I think there's a really positive side in the fact that everyone has realized that we can use the platform of sport to promote, for best practice and to promote actions. I think we're at an interesting point where we need to step beyond being a great communication platform and really walking the walk. I mean, I think it's getting harder because to begin with, we started talking about ocean plastic, and we were pretty credible talking about ocean plastic because there was a lot we could do about removing it from events and what we're doing. As it has shifted much more towards climate, it becomes much harder for us to talk credibly without putting in place some very strong actions, because our model has very high climate impacts. I think the next conversation that we're moving into, and that I posed a question onto the earlier panel, is around biodiversity risks. And I don't think we're at all ready to talk about that credibly, because we need to take into account the very real risks. And actually, that graph, it's got biodiversity risks on there, but life cycle assessment doesn't talk about, the risks we pose to wildlife at sea when we go out racing as well. So I think it's very important for us to be thinking about that and trying to get ahead of the conversation.
But Erwan, how many boats a year do you manufacture as a group?
Should I answer to this question? No, it depends. It depends of the year, but we are between 6,000 and 8,000 per year.
Yeah. So you're selling to a market which we like to think, don't we, those of us involved in boating and sailing, that we're in a clean environment, that we're harnessing the wind, it's only wind and water. But in reality, we are using resource to be able to address that. When in your vice president's title at Group Beneteau, how do you address that thinking between should we be doing anything other than maybe sit on the beach? And should we have gone to the beach on foot or on our bikes? We shouldn't have driven there. How do we square away those positions?
Well, the fact is, for me, at the beginning, we need to be aware of the fact that we have an impact, an environmental impact. And when we started this kind of topic, like 4 or 5 years ago, it was difficult because we didn't really understand how much our activity was impactful in terms of the environment. So the first step was really to measure what we are doing. So it's for that I say, and I agree with Kellie to say, the life cycle assessment is not the entire answer, but at least it gives some data, and it helps you to understand exactly what you are doing right now. So we started this work 3 years ago, and what we saw also talking with our competitors, like Fontaine-Pajot, Katana, Grand Large, it's even though we wanted to be extremely clear on what we were doing and extremely transparent on the results that we were obtaining, we were not all measuring the same way. So at the end of the day, we had some data, but we were not sure it was robust enough to share with our end user. So the second step was to clarify it and to make sure that all of us agree on making a standard way of making life cycle assessment. So we are today launching this project of making a standard for all the industry.
And on standards, I was interested to, and I think it was the session when Mark Somerville was talking about setting standards. And do you as Beneteau set your own standards, or do you seek to find a universally, if there is one, set of standards that you can manufacture to, or and back onto? I think, Kellie, if you can also speak to the life cycle assessments and so on that you've been involved in, and things like Marine Shift 360. What do we need to do as an industry, and what are Beneteau doing specifically? So if you can each take that would be great.
You want to take it? Yeah. So first of all, we are not making our life cycle assessment alone. We are asking for external experts to make it with us in order to make sure that the result that we have is completely clear again and transparent for everyone. So that's the first step. The second step is we don't have any interest of trying to lie about the result, because the idea behind that is to, after you have the data, is to be able to put some action in order to reduce your environmental impact. So you need really to know exactly where you are, and then you can start to make your own development solution. I don't know if it's clear.
And Kellie, to the measurement tools that you've been involved in and are involved in, could you talk to us about that and how? It'd be interesting to see whether the delegates here are aware, and also whether they are. And feel free, by the way, to let's make this as interactive as you want. Don't wait until the end if you've got something that's burning during this session. Please contribute.
Yes, so absolutely. I was involved in the development of the Marine Shift 360 tool. This was when I was working with 11th Hour Racing, and the tool is now it continues to be supported by them and is managed by the company Anthesis. I would actually agree 100% with what Erwan has just said there about standardization. At the moment, we don't have enough data. We don't have enough comparable data. I also worked on the project last year with the FF1 about trying to do a carbon, an analysis of the Le Course au Large, offshore racing in France. It was really hard because we sort of thought we had enough data, and then we started digging into it, and this is just carbon footprinting, which is one part of a life cycle assessment, and it was really hard because we weren't following the same rules, and therefore it wasn't as precise as we wanted it to be. So I would also just push on that. I mean, the standardization piece is so important, but also that we start doing it. We need to make this obligatory, and I think John will speak to some key levers we've got to push on that coming up, but we need to make it obligatory, and we need to push it down the supply chain because it's also really hard. Even with a tool like Marine Shift 360, which is just a bit over €2,000 a year to use, it's like next to free.
Well, describe for everybody what the tool does.
Oh, Marine Shift 360 is a streamlined life cycle assessment tool. So it's not as precise as something like SEMA Pro, which is the most developed on the market, but it's been developed with the marine industry very much to try and understand, make sure that the data that's in there is very relevant for us, but also to make it really easy to use. So you don't have to be a life cycle assessment expert to use Marine Shift 360. I can say that because I've used it, but it's incredibly easy to use. The idea is it's a design tool, actually, so that you're trying to use it upstream as well. So early on, we're in a bit of a situation at the moment that we're measuring after the fact, and we need to, with everything, we've got to get upstream of these problems, make for the industry as well, right? Because otherwise we're going to fix it down the way. So Marine Shift 360 is very much a design tool. It's to give you an idea, say, okay, where are my impacts? What could I change? Make it easy to do. I mean, I think Erwan could talk to this because I know you guys use this as well.
Yeah, actually, we use Marine Shift, and as I explained to Kellie, it's exactly what she mentioned. We use it when we want to compare an apple with an apple. So basically, we have an idea of something that we want to launch on the next product, and we try to check on this specific aspect if we reduce the environmental impact on the material, for instance, or on our new propulsion or whatever. So it is an extremely useful tool, and again, it's €2,000 a year, so it's close to be free.
Just quick question to the floor. Is anybody in here using measurement tools themselves? One or two? Yeah. Okay. Clearly, there's an opportunity.
Yeah, I would just, can I just finish on that about the life cycle assessment and why it's important to push it through the supply chain, is that even with a tool that's as simple and cheap to use as that, there is a big resource requirement in terms of the data collection. And this is really hard at the moment because that's not happening through the supply chain. So you're trying to do one, and it's really difficult to get the data. So it's so important to try and get this being built from the ground up so that these become easier for the industry to do.
So we're talking quite a lot here about voluntary behaviour, and that's great when people do step up. But I think we all know, and we might have even done it ourselves, if we can get away with something, we possibly do, especially if it comes at a cost which we don't feel we can afford. But John, you've very much been involved in the what happens to when legislation becomes a requirement, because I think that, in fact, if you can just pick up the topic and describe how you got involved in it and what you've seen by necessary legislation and the example of what's happening with the anti-greenwashing legislation.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. The point is that we live in a sort of supply-induced demand assessment where we have a tribe of consumers that are willing to buy goods that are labeled as green because they feel the sense of urgency of doing something for the climate change and something for the planet. And 40% of, let's say, consumer are willing to try to pay a premium price for something that is green or is green compliant. So everyone is using or sometimes abusing the green label. This is what greenwashing is about. It's about supply and demand, telling the client that they belong to a tribe of people that do care about the planet and the environment. There is no planet B, while at the end of the day, underneath the product per se, there are no data or no evidence of the fact that the product is green or green compliant. The EU Department for Justice and Consumers did a research a few years ago in 2019, and they figured out that 4% of the overall consumers started a claim against a producer of a product or a service just because they were showing labels saying that the product was green or green related, and they sued them and they won cases against them for, let's say, mismarketing or breaching of trust in terms of consumers and selling products to consumers. So there is a point and there is a problem behind it. So the European Commission started a journey in 2019, and the point about it is that they took a lot of time to come out with the EU directive in May 2024, the anti-greenwashing EU directive. It's a very short document. It's a 16-page document that sets the stage for what the legislator will consider green in terms of, let's say, or that could be labeled as green or climate compliant and, let's say, climate friendly or eco-friendly. 4 pillars. I don't want to bother you too much with the legislation. The legislation is not yet crystallized into an applicable law. The applicable law will be issued in 2 years, and this is another problem about it. We have a window of 2 years. Well, the only thing that will be, let's say, relevant will be the metus or the trust that we will try to create with consumers. But when we don't have an applicable legislation so far, it will take until May 2026 to have a legislation and September 26 to have it enforceable in each and every UE country. So that's another point. But that said, 4 pillars, we will have to focus on the products and certify that those products are designed to be eco-friendly, designed to be repairable, designed to minimize spare parts or abuse of spare parts, even in the packaging. The waste has to be minimized, and the recycling will be key. So those are the 4 pillars of the law. The point about what's missing in this, what do we have and what's missing? We are missing one of the most important things in this EU decree. We are missing the data part. We are missing the tool to measure what is to be considered green, what is to be considered eco-friendly. We miss data, we miss a benchmark. Perhaps the tool you're using could be suggested to the European Commission to be incorporated in the effective law that will be issued in adherence with the directive in the coming two years, in order to be the toolkit and gear that will ensure this certification. Now they are opting for something that is an ISO 1994 and something. I don't really remember the exact name of the ISO. They're going for an ISO certification, but this is not clear at this stage.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I wanted to answer to that. The idea of the work that we are doing right now in Europe to standardize the LCA, it's exactly that. It's basically focusing on the end user, and at the end to be able to provide a unique score that will give you a global overview of the boat that you are buying, how much impactful it's on Earth, and be able again to compare an apple with an apple. If you go to Beneteau or if you go to someone else, you will be able to know exactly how much impactful is the boat. So I think it's one of the good KPIs that we could have tomorrow.
That's absolutely great, and this is what's needed. It's also you can see or find a short video about this UAE directive and this representative of Croatia that has led the discussion at the EU Parliament, and this is exactly what they say it's missing. a common sense or a common opinion on what's to be considered the metrics in order to measure what's really green and what's greenwashing. So this is the very point about it. Two last points. One about the EU and one about real life and practice, what's happening nowadays. So the point about the EU directive, it's super unclear on how we will measure it, but on the other way around, it's super clear on what will be considered greenwashing. Greenwashing will be everything that is too generic. So if you'll call your product eco-friendly, if you will opt for net zero as a balance, if you will opt to, let's say, a very vague definition and non-quantifiable or measurable definition of what's the impact of your product, that will be forbidden. And where is this mirrored? This is mirrored in Article 26 of the Italian Consumer Code, and we already have a normal law that says that the company that misused or abuses those kind of supply-driven approach to sensible matters could be sanctioned with fines that reaches 4% of their global turnover. So we are talking about a lot of money. So from 5 to 10 million euros yearly until 4% if there is a sort of European sanction on that, without getting into too much details. So what's going on in real life nowadays? What's really effective? What are the kits, the tools and kits that we have? One is about the sort of, let's say, internal approach that many companies and many federations, when it comes to sport, to have. Let me give you a real example. Like the Italian Rugby Federation will not allow you to become a sponsor of the Italian Rugby Federation if you are not green. And when they mean green by reality. So your product has to be totally green and totally compliant with the guidelines of the EU directive. It will not be enough that you provide a bottle of water as a sponsor for the rugby team. You have to be plastic free, you have to be 0 miles away from the supplier, you have to care about the condition of the storage of the water, and so on and so forth. This is how they try to be compliant, because they want to give their followers and fans, let's say, a tangible approach to what's green and what's climate friendly. Another very important tool is about money. And sorry to say that, but when you have a gap in legislation, money and financing and sponsorship and all those kind of agreements may come into play. And there is the so-called financial directive that was issued a couple of years ago that says that some private equity funds and some financial institutions that consider themselves green, sustainable, and socially benefit for the community has to be compliant with those green-related array of indications set by the EU directive. So if you want to have the tax benefit of being green and compliant, and if you want to be a green and compliant private equity fund, and if you want to invest into certain activities that are green, you have to be green by definition. So you will have to provide a certificate, an ESG compliance certificate or statement by an external auditor. It can't be internal, that confirms that, at least in general, although we don't yet have a way to measure what we're talking about in terms of concrete data, you are to be considered green. So nowadays we have a soft commitment and a hard commitment. Soft commitment in the way that federation and big entities are trying to enter the market, and a hard commitment of those that are benefiting from tax advantages and financial advantages to be green. That this is the state of the law at the moment.
Which makes me think of the packaging waste directive. You mentioned packaging waste, and I think certainly with most of the EU, maybe all of the EU, a place that Britain used to be part of, he says embarrassedly, the packaging waste directive means that the manufacturers have responsibility, don't they, to recover that waste. Do you guys have that same responsibility? The reason I asked that question is that
we have it in France. We have it in France. That's the only country who has it today. We are what we call REP, Responsabilité élargie des producteurs, sorry, it's in French. It's the only one who exists in the world. Actually, we have also an association called APER, who is in charge of dismantling the boat at the end of their life and try to recycle as much as they can the boat. But it only exists in France because when you are talking about the packaging, you have a European REP law existing, and today we are fighting in order to have exactly the same for the entire industry, boat industry, in order to make sure that we can deploy APER in all the different European
Well, that's interesting, because we don't have television in North Yorkshire where I live, you know, it's, so we have to watch things on my phone. And there's a thing on Facebook or Instagram called GRP landfills. I don't know if anybody else watches GRP landfills. And you see these boats that were once fantastic and expensive going into it becoming landfill. So if you're dealing with that, Erwan, I think that's to your great credit.
Yeah, sorry. We are doing it. Yes, yeah, we are doing it. We still have one challenge, that it's the glass fiber. Okay, we need to find a solution for the glass fiber. But except the glass fiber, you can either reuse all the material inside a boat or take out some energy if you take into consideration, for example, the resin. So today you have 75% of the boat that can be reused or resourced in France.
May I just to add? This is very interesting and raises another, I'd say, lateral matter, but you know that is worth mentioning. At a European level, we are missing a common market when it comes to greenwashing, and the fact that France has this law and Italy does not, it's a problem per se, because this is, in terms of competition, something that to a certain extent jeopardizes the decision of companies to locate their assets or locate their premises in center country. So another point that has been raised by the Commission is that we need a common market. So in the coming couple of years, what they say they're going to do is to try to create a sort of, let me call it, a Bible of climate change related laws that shall be applicable in terms of general regulation and not as a directive in each and every country in the European market. Wishful thinking at this stage, but this is for sure the other needed step. So we need to measure and we need to have a common market without competing, you know, in terms of...
You're an international lawyer.
I am.
So, and I've been obsessively glued to watching what's happening with a former ex-president in the United States, and everything for him seems to be about a First Amendment right to say whatever he wants. Does First Amendment right in being able to make any claim you feel like, and no matter how far from the truth it is that sort of thing that can happen in US commercial legislation, or is that ultra vires that?
I really don't know. So okay. I'm sorry, I really don't know. I can't give you an answer. But I really
you can make it up.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on US law.
Okay, so and I was thinking as well about the sailing events that really are making big claims about them. How do we all feel about some of the sailing events that are, I guess, virtue signaling and seeking their commercial differential through that? Is that something that you think is going to be put into doubt by this impending legislation?
I think so, yes. Because legislation will create constraint will change the market. So yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Can I ask what the baseline is though? Like, are we looking at in terms of saying what is more sustainable? Is this a kind of sliding scale? So it's got to be more sustainable than what we did yesterday and continuously improving. Because in terms of events, for example, I mean, there are events that are making some really big efforts and are arguably better than they were. So is that going to be enough?
I think that in terms of legislation, it will not going to be enough. At a certain point in time, you will have a standard that you will have to cope with. It's not a matter of what you've been doing until yesterday. It's like, think about an iPhone. You can slightly make it a little bit better, but the legislation will ask you to have something that is designed to be repaired. So it's not about a slight improvement, it's a gap that you have to fulfill. So you'll need to have a product, a service that is, completely friendly, in line with the 4 pillars that the legislation provides with, no matter how. Otherwise, you will not call it green. That's the point. You can opt out and just say that this is not eco-friendly without doing greenwashing and say that this is... But there's a point about it. Will you be appealing to the coming generation of consumer if you will not be green enough for them to be part of your tribe? This is the question I have in mind.
Yep. Well, it's a fair question, isn't it? Yeah.
But you can opt out.
And also something that maybe also massively changes across the global spectrum as well, right? I think we get quite used to the European viewpoints on things. But you said about having common markets and things, and there's going to be a difference in that as well on what consumers want. I was chatting with someone earlier about building boats in Asia and their markets in America, and so their pressure is very much coming from the American market on what the market wants. And in Europe, I think we're seeing a big improvement in what the market wants, but not everywhere, right? So that's going to also be difficult to deal with.
If I may, that's a very good point. The fact that you have a European legislation is not enough because company tends to migrate and business tends to migrate. So if you want to make a change and a difference, as you said when we had our call, you need a global intervention that has to be UN driven. That's the other point about it. Like, we are talking about the EU legislation, but at the end of the day, we are part of the problem, but we are not the entire problem. We should think about the same issue in the GCC. Saudi is going to be the huge market in the coming years. India, China, and perhaps Africa. So, or the US. I'm not that familiar with the US, but so that's the point. Like, legislation on greenwashing shall become international, because Europe at the end of the day is nothing but a small region within a huge globe of opportunities. So,
but looking at some big global businesses, Formula One, and Liberty have just bought Motocross GP, I think. They don't seem to be fazed by that at all, and they're layering on more and more revenue and presumably younger audiences. So they're going counter to us all trying to fight to try and make ourselves green. So do you work in that space as well?
Yeah. So I work with a couple of teams there. Yeah.
Right.
And there are a couple of nice projects behind Formula One as well. You can't compare it to sailing. It's another world, it's another kind of consumers, it's another cluster in terms of age, it's another approach and attitude, and it's another Weltanschauung. So, but yes, they are also moving in that direction.
But there are lots
but there you have, like MotoGP, you have Dorna, that is the owner of the essential facility that is setting the rule at the centralized level. So you have a sort of monopoly, and there is an entity that is setting the rules in order to collect sponsors and money. So this is the driver behind it.
Okay. All right. Yes.
I would also, I feel like we're coming at this from an angle of, what's going to force us to do this, right? And clearly we need these levers pushing us forward. But it sort of makes me ask as well, what point are we going to be recognizing that all of this is in our own benefit? I mean, the mayor of Genoa today was speaking about the benefit of the blue economy. We're not going to have a blue economy if we don't protect the heart of the blue economy, which is the ocean. And so all these impacts come back round and hit the ocean. And there's a piece of work I love by the La Fondation de la Mer, which is a French association, where they took a lot of the metrics that exist and they created something called Ocean Approved, which is a matrix basically taking those all into how does that impact the ocean. So any company, but particularly I feel like the boating industry should be thinking about this and saying, well, what are the chemicals I'm using? What is the impact of that on the ocean? What is the plastic? What are the other types of materials that I'm using that have got this negative effect? What are my climate change change impacts? What are my impacts on marine habitats? That we need to be also, I mean, unfortunately the feedback loop is not there, right? Because this is all so slow. But we need to be thinking about the fact that sometimes that's going to come back and bite us in the butt. And people like, in Saudi, I mean, they've got the Red Sea project down there and stuff. I mean, these are the kind of projects that we should also be engaging with, because it's so important for them to protect that pristine habitat. And we should be thinking in that way as well, that it's in our benefit. And instead of having to wait for, somebody to poke us, like maybe we should say, well, we're protecting what is fundamentally at the heart of everything we do. Thank you.
I think we have approval. And this is before we get into deep sea mining as well, isn't it? So, well, let's move on to questions. We're running a little bit over time, I think, because with somebody a bit late in arriving, if I'm correct in saying, Luca. Okay, so
There's questions.
So we'll just take 2 or 3 questions, and then I'm going to play a little video.
Just a comment, really. I think we're membership of the Water Revolution Foundation, and also Sea Index in Monaco. So, and that's more to do, obviously, with super yachts and measuring their impact. And then I think there's the yacht Yeti. I can't remember what it. Yeah. Yeah. So that, I mean, that's for super yachts, but I mean, you could do something similar with smaller yachts as well, I guess. And that's what you're talking about, measuring each yacht, and when you come to buy it, you can look at the. So it's just a comment, really.
Yeah. What we are doing today, it's for boat between 6 meters and 24 meters. Yeti was for above 24 meters, but it is exactly the same idea.
Question back there.
Hi, Paolo from Grid. Kellie, you refer to us having to walk the walk, which I wholeheartedly agree with. What I'd like to hear from you and from Erwan is how long before we have no choice other than walking the walk. And I'm not referring to the planet going upside down and then we do have no choice, but maybe in the shorter term, the market giving us no choice, i.e. people will stop buying boats, sponsors will stop sponsoring events if we don't deliver something that is credibly sustainable. I mean, it's maybe a question, I mean, I have conversations with people in the industry and they say, well, yeah, we do have solutions to reduce our footprint, but people are not prepared to pay the extra, pay the premium. So there's no point. Is that the way you see it as well? Or do you see hints of people going, well, in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time, if we don't offer something that's really, truly more sustainable, people will just stop buying and we'll have no choice?
I mean, so I think this greenwashing law is going to be powerful in that. I mean, there's more and more evidence that the consumer genuinely wants better products and that they will even pay more for that. So hopefully, the option to say, either, prove that, a product is more ecologically friendly or to not make that claim, hopefully that will still work to encourage people to take the option of measuring and proving that. I think one project, I mean, in terms of professional racing, I thought something I found very interesting. I think it was last year. There's actually a group called Sports Sponsors for Climate Action, which for me is very much the missing piece in all of this, because you need the client to demand change. So in the offshore racing industry, that needs to be the team, but the only person a team will answer to is the sponsor. So Accor have signed that. I think EDF have signed that as well. I'm yet to see how much pressure exactly that's putting. Having said that, I work with the French team who are, Orient Express is part of the Accor group, and it did give me the ability to really push the team to make sure we did a carbon footprinting. So, which maybe, anyway, I'm not sure we're going to want to publish the result of the carbon footprint of the America's Cup team, but again, it speaks to that point of saying we need this if we're going to reduce it. And for me, it was important to show the sponsor that we've done it this year, so that next year we can actually make informed decisions on how we're going to bring it down. So that's one part of the answer. I think the larger consumer piece might be harder to answer, so I'm going to pass it over to Erwan.
I was checking the name of the guy, but I couldn't find it. I will answer in 3 ways to this question, but really, really quickly. The first one is you have the first answer coming from Earth. Okay, how much Earth can accept what we are doing today? There was a theory in 1970s. That was the name that I was looking for. From 2 American guys who say that basically, they made a model and they check how much impact we had on Earth and what was the percolation point. So at yeah, but there is someone else. But anyway, yeah, but the percolation point, we are here today. So it means that if we go ahead like we do today, we are screwed. It's as simple as that. That's nothing about being pessimistic, it's a fact. The only way that we were not on the curve was the year of the COVID. That's the only year we didn't follow this simulation, as simple as that. The second answer will be regulation. It's for that I'm looking at my friend here. I think regulation is part of the answer, because at the end of the day, when you don't want to do regulation, do it for you. And the third one is, as we mentioned before, we have a young generation that will become the next buyer of our boat, and they are extremely concerned by it. So I think we will have also to keep in mind that the next generation are not the buyer of today. I don't know if it answers to your question, this reference. I would say regulation 5 years, as I say, for Earth, it's today.
You talk about the work on the standardization on eco-friendly score for nautic industry and boat industry. I have a question about how to manage the knowledge on eco-friendly and footprint improvement in the industry. How to manage that between the company, because this score should be an criteria for the sale of boats. So how to manage the improvement knowledge on the footprint of the boat.
I can answer and you can add some comment. Well, the idea of the standardization is also to share all the database behind it. So it means that we will standardize also the database that will bring the information into the tool that Kellie was mentioning. So I will give an example. If tomorrow you are replacing a thermal combustion engine by an electrical one, we won't take into consideration that you are dealing with this supplier or this supplier. Will give you the data for the electrical engine. And you will be able to make your calculation taking that into account. And therefore, at the end, we have all the same tool available, all the same database available, and therefore we are able to say, okay, this specific action impact or not the global environmental aspect. I don't know if it's clear.
We need to get the IP panel back on.
This is exactly the point about it, because everything is theoretically feasible, but when you talk to, let me share a name, Azimut, Beneteau, or Ferretti, or whatever, just put a name on the table, and go to the CEO and tell him that he has to take all the data about the way he produces top-notch pieces of his products and convey those data into a database and make it public, or at least public enough to be comparable with what the rest of the industry is doing. They will at least shake their head and say, and what about my, let's say, sensible data and know-how and patent and IP protection and competitive advantage? Am I willing to renounce to a bit of my competitive advantage for the sake of being comparable with someone else? In terms of marketing, being comparable to someone else is the worst thing that could happen. Because if you start comparing, you rationalize the decision of your customer that is an emotional customer, and you bring him down to earth. And this has an impact on the price and an impact on your R&Ds. I don't know if you see my point. And this is the next big problem, not just having income paper in terms of legislation, but having this legislation transform into something that is, at a certain extent, digestible by a company that is there to make money. And this is a challenge. I don't know how this will be tackled or solved, but it's a matter to be taken into account.
And I think if I can add on that as well, you mentioned marketing. Like, it speaks to one of the main problems we still have in sustainability is that it's viewed as a marketing asset. We're yet to move into the point that this is core to a company's business strategy and also core to any type of industry. You know, if we were all sustainable, then it wouldn't be a competitive mark. We could just continue to keep competing on our organizational knowledge and our, innovation and creativity capabilities.
Like quality,
exactly. But we're in this transition stage where, sustainability costs money. It's severely under-resourced. There was a brilliant post the other day that someone said, does anybody think it's just accountants that are winning from sustainability because we're being asked to report all the time, right? And I find this a constant challenge of how do I balance my time on reporting compared to my time of actually trying to do stuff, right? And I would much rather try and do stuff, but every time I haven't reported, I've regretted it because people need it, right? So and that just speaks to the fact that we're massively under-resourced sector of work, particularly in an industry like ours, which is predominantly SMEs, right? And I think this speaks very much to your point there about, sharing innovations and things, and how do we manage that in a predominantly SME-based industry? But it's still on this marketing, so we need to find ways to go beyond that to help the industry see that this can be a core business strategy.
Let me give you my solution, and I don't know if this is the magic stick, but I think that the only way out, the only way to sugarcoat the pill here is to give a tax advantage to those that are compliant with the law. So they will see their turnover reduced by an X%, but they need also to see their taxation reduced in order to maintain the curve of efficiency that they're looking for in order to be sustainable in terms of return on investment. But don't want to take it too far.
It's the principle of taxonomy.
Absolutely. Okay. We get there. I mean, this is my opinion. At the end of the day, we'll get there. There will be a public player that will put some money on the table for something that is considered a public interest.
So in danger of you getting to the end way before we do, I probably need to wrap up this session. Luca Rizzotti and I and a few others, Conrad Humphreys and so on, got invited to the Azores to see the whaleboats. And it made me think, Enrico Benco, who's my friend over there, who talked to me many years ago about the importance of looking at materials. There we were, seeing wooden boats made out of materials that were grown on that island, and they were going to catch the mast. I think they didn't have much chance of running away, didn't those trees? But it also makes me think about the importance of the heritage of Genoa, the heritage of Beneteau, a 140-year-old company. You weren't making boats out of GRP or out of carbon 140 years ago. So I think it's important that we remember that within our fantastic industry, that we have materials which we can still use that can be part of our future. Thank you.